Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Ken Russell. I live right there. I'm not a community activist. I'm not an environmentalist. I'm just a neighbor, just like you guys. And I've watched this park over the last 10 years as I've lived here. I have 3 children that have grown up and have been playing in here up until last year when it was closed. I want everyone to understand that we're not trying to attack the city, put the city on super defensive. Even though we're screaming as loud as we can, it's just to be heard so that we can have a good conversation. So as you all get mobilized and join us on our Facebook group, Friends of Merry Christmas Park, please everyone remember to keep everything very civil. We're trying to come to an agreement with the city, which is what we're hoping for, because the plan that we are understanding and learning about is not the plan that I believe is good for our park. And from the people I've spoken with, it doesn't seem like it's a good plan for them either. Just to give you a little bit of background, all the information that I have, like I said, I'm not a specialist, has come from the city. They've been very, very cooperative. Every time I write a letter, I've gotten a response. They've given me documents and plans and everything about what's going on. Unfortunately, it only came to light that all this was happening after the bulldozers arrived. I, living here, have never seen a notification of what was going to happen. I never received a notification that our park was going to be declared a brownfield site. If you're not familiar with what a brownfield site is, from what I've learned in this past week, this is a mechanism that's offered by the federal government as well as the state government to help fund cleanups. Typically used for, projects that are in very bad situation, abandoned gas stations that nobody wants to touch. The idea is, here's some money to a developer who's going to come in and help revitalize this area that nobody wants to touch. Here's some money and here's some freedom from liability in the future, if anyone comes back and tries to cause, if you have issues with it. So it's to encourage development. This park can fall under that designation, but there are a lot of steps that the city is supposed to go through before it makes that designation, because it is a permanent designation, and it has been seen in other parts of the country to reduce home values just by being labeled adjacent to a brownfield site, and it never goes away. Could the city do this project without having the brownfield site designation? It's a good conversation to have. All of you as neighbors, if you knew at all that this place was being designated as a brownfield site, please raise your hand. Anybody? They say that they've posted in papers. They say that they've created the committee that they're supposed to, but it seems to have gone under the radar from all of us. And either we're all completely ignorant, or the outreach just wasn't strong enough. And that's what I believe. So that's the brownfield site part of this. And we know that a demand letter has been filed with the city to ask many questions about whether or not they followed the right procedures to designate this as a brownfield site. We would like that designation removed. We don't think it should be on this. I can't speak for the other 5 parks that have received this designation, but I believe it's just a financial mechanism and a liability mechanism to save some money. And if they're going to save that money, that goes to my next point, let's spend the money to do it right. The remediation that you see over there is a large mountain of contaminated soil that has been unearthed from within the park. Most of it came from up on the lagoon side, where they used to dump the ash from the incinerator, and it would have come down that side of the park and just sort of fanned out. It's not the type of toxin, as I understand, that leaches and floats and goes all over the place. It's a heavy metal. There's arsenic. There's all sorts of things. Kind of stays in place, as it has for probably over 50 years. My issue is that now they're digging it up and not removing it. To me, this doesn't make any sense at all. If they're just going to cap it, that's one thing, which they are doing a lot of capping. Everything that they take out, they are going to eventually cap. But what I don't understand is, if you're going to take it out and do some capping, why not just take it away? The excuse I've been told is, it's too expensive. This is a toxic chemical, it's difficult to deal with, it's difficult and expensive to remove and dispose of. You think of these like toxic drums and, specialized guys in suits. This, according to the county, County Durham, Wilbur Mayorga has told me that this passes what's called a TCLP test. Do I sound like a specialist now? And that test means that this stuff can be put in any lined landfill. We have those. This can't be that expensive. I've been told it's going to be an extra $2 million if we want to remove that pile of soil. And I don't believe that's true. I have asked that question and I have not received an answer as to whether or not they looked into a budgeting question. What would it cost just to remove what we dig up and then carry on with the rest of the plan as is? That's what I'd like to know. Because I have talked to some land clearing people, and it's a complete estimate at this point. But we don't think it would cost more than $20,000, maybe $30,000 to remove that pile that's right there and put it in a landfill. Because the alternative is they're going to spread that out over that entire section of the park. It will increase the toxic footprint in the park by 34%. That's a fact. The square footage of the original toxic footprint will be bigger once they're done. It'll be underground, but the fact is most of it is underground now. The only thing that was actually exposed on the surface of the ground was the area closest to the banyan trees. All of this in the center of the park that is now covered with contaminated soil was actually 1/2 foot to 1 foot underground. It was already somewhat capped. All they had to do was cap it some further, put a little extra soil. But now they've created this mountain that they don't want to get rid of. I don't know why they would stand so strongly that it needs to stay here. I think we should look at and discuss options of just removing that contaminated soil that's been brought out. They can tell me all day long with a specialist, with a doctor, with whoever, that my kids can play in this, that they can eat it in small amounts, that you can roll in and it doesn't have any issue. But the fact is the county closed this park for a reason. The fact is all of their workers wear full hazmat gear every day for a reason. And arsenic doesn't sound good to me. I don't know about parts per million, I don't know about all this, but the stigma that's going to be attached with our park is not going to be a good one. And the perception alone will affect our home values. Whatever the facts remain are, that's going to affect our home values. So if I could just finish with one more thing, there's a third point. The brownfield designation we'd like removed. That pile right there we'd like removed. The third thing we'd like is to address the county's designation as all of our homes within a 1/4 mile of this site as within a 1/4 mile of a contaminated site. That's my daughter, she's not happy. The county has been very cooperative and they're saying that they can only remove that designation if they remove all of the contaminant. And that's not necessarily a realistic thing. But we feel that whatever is good enough for the city to do as a cleanup should be good enough for the county to call this place clean. If the county can't call this place clean, then in my mind, the city didn't clean it enough. It may cost more, but this is one of the few remaining neighborhood parks in the city. It's so beautiful. Every time something is proposed to go up in here, we fight it because we want it left just like it is. And in fact, in the city memo, proposing for the brownfield sites, one of the things stated was, we will return the park to its original state. And I don't think that's on the plan right now. So, those are the three things that I'm hoping we are asking for as a group. City Hall meeting is this coming Thursday. Commissioner Sarnoff has been very kind to come. I'm sure he's very welcome to speak if he'd like today. Also, you all can speak with him directly. The city has their position on this. I am hoping that we can massage the position a little to remove what's been dug up. I'm not saying remove it all. I'm saying remove what's been dug up. It doesn't make sense to dig it up and spread it around. You know, it just doesn't make sense. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. Any of you can come to the meeting on Thursday. That's very helpful. We have a petition starting, and I'm going to put a red dot on every resident's house that signs the petition to say that everybody in the surrounding area is with us on this. All we want is the removal of the contaminated soil that's been dug up. Please sign the petition. Please put your address. And if you want to be in touch with us as a group, Friends of Merrie Christmas Park, there's an email sign up there. I'll put you on the list. As well, we have a Facebook group. It's called Friends of Merrie Christmas Park. You can find it on Facebook. So, that's all I have to say. If anyone has any questions first, please, I'll answer. And then if anyone else would like to speak, you're very, very welcome. Yes?
Question. If they remove the contaminated soil, is that going to change the designation from a brownfield site?
The brownfield site is completely, to my understanding, the brownfield site is completely independent of whatever remediation they do.
Wow.
The brownfield site actually came into place after the remediation plan was finished. And so it's simply a financial and liability designation. So it doesn't, that brownfield site is permanent no matter, as long as they clean to the state levels. And part of our biggest fight is that what they're doing actually is a legal method. For me, it's just not the one I would have chosen. Yes, sir.
Is there a process to achieving the three things you talk about? I mean, is there, to go to this meeting and then signing up, is there some set specific process, whether it's letters or talking to the commissioners or things?
Well,
we need to go to achieve these.
Depending on the strength of the neighbors, hopefully as a voice, so far the voices have been parried with a lot of reasoning and statistics and ideas of why this is a good decision. I don't think they're going to convince us, but I don't think they're going to stop. If we can convince them that doing this one part that we're asking for will make all of us be quiet and not sue the city based on the values of our homes and the health of our children, then hopefully they do that part. But that would be our only next remedy because they're within the law. Other than the brownfield site, which we believe that they've done without proper notification, that might be able to be vacated. We have to get a lawyer. And unfortunately, this is not some class action damages case at this point where the big lawyers are coming out of the woodwork. We've interviewed 9 attorneys, and several of them have been very interested, but nobody wants to work for free. So, neighbors, we may need some help.
Are they local residents, those 9 lawyers expected?
They're all within Miami. They're all within Miami.
Within the quarter mile of the...
Yes, some of them live here. Yep.
And they won't work for free?
No, but I wouldn't either. I can't blame them in that sense. They're doing a job for people. We want something done, and they're going to help us, but it will cost some.
You are working for free.
My wife would like me to be working on my other job. Yes.
Is there a consideration, could you not dig a hole on this property that's obviously not too deep, you'll hit water, and put the dirt back where it came from and then cover it up so you don't have the cost incurred in trucking it somewhere else?
No, I believe the reason it was dug up was because the actual area where it came from was at normal ground level, level with the street,
Right.
up on that end, and they couldn't cap above that. Obviously,
Correct.
that's Lejeune Road.
But there is a slope there.
There is a slope, so they removed out down to a certain amount
Right.
in that area, but that produced all of this. If you look at the holes around, it doesn't look like the holes are that big, but the amount of soil it produced is all there.
Right.
No, I think the only option, other than the one that they've proposed of making these mounds and everything, is removal. But there's one other reason that I haven't mentioned of why I think the mounds are a bad idea. This grading is a bad idea. They've preserved all the trees, which is great. There's about 6 or 7 trees we would have had to lose on that area if they had done, a full dig out. And they've worked very hard to preserve that. I've got to thank, the city for taking those efforts because they know how crazy the Grovites are about their trees. But in order to preserve those and build a mound of up to 5 feet high around them, and those numbers are from the contractor and the city, the arborist that the city's hired, they're going to have these sloping hills that go down into the bases of the trees so that the roots can breathe. So the tree's actually going to be almost like 4 or 5 feet underground with a sloping area. My worry is that's now toxic soil piled next to the tree, clean soil on top of that, but here we've got an opportunity for rainfall, and you've seen how this park can flood. It floods to this deep at least once a year in here. That could erode. They say to me, don't worry, we're going to plant grass there. Everybody knows that grass doesn't grow under the poinciana trees, under these trees. And so there's going to be open dirt for kids to dig in, for the rain to wash away, and we just think, get rid of it. Any other questions?
Just that. No, go ahead.
I wanted to know if you have any knowledge of anyone getting, any children, any adults getting sick from the contaminated soil.
I saw one news report only where a parent had gotten their child tested and they had come up with something, but I haven't looked into it or verified it. I couldn't say. I don't know.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
I played in this park in the 50s when I was a kid. I went to Sunset Elementary. I lived on San Vicente, where I still live now, and other than the warts and the big tumors on my back, I'm perfectly fine.
Well, there was a cluster of pancreatic cancer discovered in the West Grove. Could it be linked to the ash in the incinerator that was actually based right there? Could that be affecting the rest of us? We'll never know because that study got shut down. It was being done at the University of Miami and they lost their funding for whatever reason. So we don't know about the illness part of things.
Regarding the brownfield, do we know what the estimate from the city would be to have to pay for it? If they didn't designate this as a brownfield, which frankly is my major concern. I agree with you completely about removing soil, but turning this into a brownfield basically reduces $100 million worth of property values.
Yep.
What is the cost to the city of not doing this under the brownfield
Well,
designation?
the city can answer better, but I understand that they found a bond for $10 to $11 million to cover all the parks that are being cleaned up. There's between 6 and 8 parks. Spread it out, you know, it's about $1 million a park, something like that.
But what does that have to do with the brownfield? Why
It doesn't. The brownfield, they can get up to
why-
$500,000 in tax credits that they can resell.
That's the only net benefit to the city.
It also gives them some liability protection in the event that it is found later that, you know, maybe kids are sick or whatever, who knows what.
That's extremely unlikely, right?
I think the brownfield thing's a pretty easy one to hopefully get rid of.
Well, ask a question. Well, if the, how do we contribute? I mean, you mentioned about contribution. I think I received a letter at my home.
Yeah.
So how will we do this? What will be the mechanism?
We're in the process of deciding whether to form a 501c3, which I don't want the headache of that, you know. But if we have to, we will, and that'll allow people to donate more freely. The other option is whatever attorney we hire, people can pay them directly and contribute. But if you'd like to help, please just get in touch with me and we'll find a mechanism. I'll find a way.
How about, I mean, if the city estimates it's going to cost $1 or $2 million to be able to remove all that fill from there. If you were to form a committee and get it done for under $100,000, which is reasonable to the residents and the city, would the city be willing to do that?
I think a lot of things that you've spoken about are all things that could be considered. You know, I think the designation, it can be stopped. The designation won't change, which is, I think, everyone's primary concern, the famous red dot on the appraiser's website of the county. We don't control that website. The county tax appraiser controls that website. We can certainly stop the designation process. We can have a robust discussion on what you want to do or not do with the removal of this particular stuff. One of the primary concerns I had was not to lose the trees. Because the only way you'll get rid of 100% of everything is to start taking down the trees. And I don't think anybody's up for that. So this is part of the conversation we'll have on Thursday, which is, you know, where can we go with this? Brownfield designation, probably very doable. What to do with this over here, a robust discussion. And then there's a third party that's not here, that's been invited to be here today and invited to be on Thursday, and that's the county. Like, for instance, by my house, there are about 11 designated circles within a quarter mile of my house. And that's the way the county operates. They never change the designation once it's been remediated. There's the old Shell gas station that was on 27th and Tiger Tail. There's the Coconut Grove Cleaners is designated. These are all the designations you'll see throughout the city. You know, the brownfield's pretty easy, but I can tell you about 57, 58% of the city is designated a brownfield. But that's something that can be dealt with on this particular property, you know, right away. With regard to that over there, that's a conversation that we can have.
I think it'd be wise, instead of pursuing with the
That's an
attorney at this
interesting
time,
idea.
is to try and work with the city, set up a cap of $100,000 if we think we can get this removed to a location, work with the city, and if the city's willing to compromise and help us out, there's no need for an attorney.
Now is the
And by
crossroad
forming-
because it's been dug up, and I would say over the next week and a half is when they're going to start spreading it. So right now it would just bring the trucks and take it away.
Sure, so I think it's better to try and get a
I like
group
that.
together.
Let's talk more, please.
And meet with the commissioner, with the city, and meet with the county, and come up with a mutual agreement that everybody's happy with, and we'll take it from there. I think it'll be the best course of action to take at
But
this
let me
point.
be clear, to get rid of the red circle, which is really, it's a real estate issue.
Right.
And I completely understand that. I mean, I'd almost want to find out how to get rid of the red circle right in front of my house too. So I have a financial interest in this as well. We're the city, so to speak. I'm your commissioner, this is the city manager. We don't control that website. You know, I invited Mayor Jimenez to be here. He lives, what, 5 blocks?
Right down the street, yes.
5 blocks away. So he has sort of an interest as well. As best we can tell, and again, I'm sure someone can tell me we're wrong, just like, you know, maybe Ken didn't get it all right either. But as best we can tell, there's no requirement to have those circles.
I've spoken a lot with Wilbur Mayorga. He's at the county, and he's been very, very thorough and very professional. And I actually have a very long email from him going through point by point by point about the trees, about the circle, about how to completely lift the circle versus partially lift the circle. Commissioner Sarnoff's correct. The only you can lift that circle if you get rid of all the contaminant. So there's for us to make a decision. are we going to get angry at him if he kills a few trees in order to remove that circle completely? The county's not doing it to stain us on purpose. The county's saying we have to cover our butts and let anyone know if there's contamination here. Whether it's capped or not, it's here. We can't pretend it's not. I'm sorry about your homes, but we have to leave that here. Now, what Mayorga did tell me is that the city had all options available to them, a whole menu of options to clean up. But it seems, I feel like the county points to the city points to the county. And if we could have that dialogue, you know, what does the county need in order to clean that circle up? Well, there's two things. There's two ways that this will be done. When they get a no further action necessary, they can stop work. And they say, okay, we did our job. And the county says, well, how well did you do your job? If you left stuff there, we're going to say this site is now closed with restrictions, meaning that we got to test it and continue to check and let everyone know in perpetuity that there's toxins under the soil. If you remove everything, then we say it's closed without restrictions, completely clean. It's a green space again. So, how many trees would we really have to kill in order to do this? The banyan trees along Lejeune would be gone for sure, and probably 3 poinciana trees over there. Is that something we would be willing to consider in order to get our homes and the county designation completely? I mean, honestly, to get rid of all the contamination, are 5 trees worth that? I don't know.
Can you make that decision? I mean, when was that decision to not clean it up completely discussed with the citizens who are affected?
Never. I mean, that was the decision, and honestly, the city has the right to make that decision without us.
Without any consultation with anybody.
As far as I understand, I mean, it would be nice.
Why not bring that up for at least a city vote? Why not let the residents say, do we want to keep 8 trees versus the opportunity to actually clean up the entire park?
Well, let's just be clear on the trees. Every tree you see has to come out. There's no tree that stays.
All the trees.
Every tree has to be 100% non-contamination.
Well,
the heavy metal toxicity
there's no
is not going to go
contamination
into
over
the
here, so
root
those
zone.
will be fine.
What's that?
The heavy metal toxicity is not going to be the same inside of a tree. I don't know if kids are going to chew on roots or anything, because that's what would have to happen. And then you'd have to have the tree actually break it down to an ionic particle, go through the lumen, to get sucked up into the roots of the tree. I find this
So
highly,
he's saying to
highly
get to the
unlikely.
soil, we've got to get rid of the trees.
I'm just talking about how it works, and I find it highly unlikely that children are going to be chewing on roots, and the heavy metal toxicity is going to be the
Well,
same.
the question is,
into the
could
root
we get rid of all the
tree.
soil without getting rid of the trees?
Yes.
And that hasn't been explored fully, I don't know.
You can go down deep enough to get rid of the toxins.
Yeah, it's up to 9 feet in some places.
Will a homeowner have any recourse if this follows the course of action that's set right now, and I go to sell my house in a year and lose 3/4 of the value of my house or half the value?
I know of somebody who bought on Woodridge. Last week they closed, and they used this as a bit of a leverage point to get a lower price. You know, I mean, and if you were trying to sell your house, you know, you might take it and run.
But that's the math that I don't understand the city's done, which is if you do the math of the amount of property value.
250 homes here.
What's the total property value of that? Let's just throw a number out there.
That house is selling for $2 million right now.
Exactly. So it's just an enormous amount of real estate to lose tax revenue off because we're letting property values degrade, right? As opposed to cleaning this up properly. I mean, I'm not going to say, I think we should cut down on the trees. I think that's a bad thing. But if that's the only way to not have this area, the entire area, marked as a brownfield.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if the city would consider taking a break on this remediation long enough for us to have this talk. Because all of these points I think are valid, and I think Commissioner Sarnoff's hearing us now, that he's here, and we're voicing it, you know, in a calm, professional manner, what we want. Hopefully, we can have that talk, but if they keep working, everyone around here is just going to get more and more angry, and lawyers are going to get hired, and things have got to take place. Hopefully, we can stop and have that conversation that should have been had 6 months ago.
Hi. I've been a homeowner on Hardy for almost 15 years. And I've done a lot of research on this, but now is the first time I've heard about it being a heavy metal, so it tends not to travel. But one of my main questions was have there been any soil boring tests outside of the park's, perimeter? I was wondering if some of my neighbors and I discussed if maybe we had a soil boring engineer type company come and just test a couple of.
I don't believe so. I think the
residents,
Shea should be
because I'd
concerned
really
for all of
like
our
to-
health and our home.
I mean, not just the property value, not just the property value, but
someone who knows more than I can.
my neighbors.
I'd like to address one over had a test.
Oh,
And
okay.
his was clean. He's just one house over.
Oh, okay.
So, Alice Bravo, Deputy City Manager.
what the county requires us to do is do a full delineation of the contaminated soil. And so the areas that were first identified were identified because you could see melted glass and metal in the soil, so that's the obvious signals. So that's where the testing commenced, and basically we started from that point and spread out until we found a full delineation of the entire area. So wherever we found let's say a dirty sample, we kept going to a clean sample. Exactly. So at this park, we were able to fully delineate within the park boundary. And so that's soil, but it does not affect any type of groundwater or anything like that.
No.
I don't know. I just
Correct.
at
At Blanche Park, for example, we do have a monitoring well for the groundwater.
Okay.
That'll remain in place until we get.
But the soil contamination has not affected the groundwater results.
We don't have that issue. But isn't it true at Blanche that some of the homes actually have discovered that they were built over the ash after the dumping was done, and that it's not contained necessarily just to the park, but it does extend to some homes? Well, at Blanche, you know, we were not able to delineate within the park, and the property owners. This is her park. Look at this child, it's her park. She wants her park.
I have a question for Mark. Will we be able to, the community be able to stop what they're doing on Thursday?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if you can stop what they're doing, but you'll be there to be heard, and you'll have an administration there, and then there could be commission action.
So it could continue,
Yeah,
and
good.
just having it spread around.
Good. That's not spreading it around is not fair, but
I'd like to make one comment as to the characterization of the cleanup. As we have a large slope here at the front of the park, we have to tie into the elevations at Lejeune Road. In order to do that and still place a 2 feet cap, basically some soil from the top of the hill is being placed at the bottom of the hill. All of it will be covered with the 2-foot cap. Basically, that extra area at the bottom of the hill represents 2.5% of the entire park area. All of it will be covered with the 2 feet cap, which is considered an engineering control. And what Durham considers an engineering control is a barrier between human contact and the soil ash underneath. So once that's fully remediated, someone walking around the park, it's just going to be a homogeneous park where everything has that 2-foot clean layer on top of it. I guess if I could just counter that point though about the 2.5% of the park, I look at the flip side and say how many square foot of contaminated soil did we have before, and how much are we going to have after? It's actually a 34% increase of grading, whether it's to tie in with whatever. I mean, that spot where that is, where they're going to be grading, was already underground. The amount of change they could have had to do is just the 1 or 2 feet.
That's not going to change the drop in our property values. Is the city going to cover that?
You know, I guess my question is, if we continue with the plan as it is, I mean, you put it very well. That was my thought. We are here in South Florida. We have a weather that can go many different ways. We know we have hurricanes. We know trees can fall down. My question is, if this is the final answer, who will monitor to assure that the plan remains adequate?
They do have to.
2 years to come.
We do, and so does the county, the Department of Environmental Resource Management, Durham. That's the part where they're closing it with restrictions, meaning that they got to check it periodically and everything, versus if they took it all out, then it would be closed without restrictions, no more testing needed. At this park, we'll probably have quarterly or annual monitoring. There are other parks where we conduct monthly monitoring and provide reports to Durham.
And I'm sorry, one more question.
Go ahead.
I would like to know if there are any other neighborhoods, as far as you know, there are close parks like this one who are contaminated. Do you have any organization like, or have mobilized themselves as we have so far?
There are 8 other parks, and if there's 250 homes within reach of this park, the quarter-mile radius, each of those parks could have very interested neighbors as well who'd like to join our efforts. Because what's happening here may happen to them. So we're hoping this becomes the template for how it's carried on to those other parks. Will they consult the neighbors before going in, before doing brownfield, before the actual remediation plan? I mean, I'm not saying that the city needs to ask our permission for every inch of move they make, but when it comes to this park that we're so precious about, such a huge change in city management's position to say, yes, we will stop this at the moment and consider the
And
options.
that's why my question was directed at both
So-
of these people. Ms. Bravo, do you have anything to say to that question?
Well, we've discussed three elements today. The brownfield designation, as Commissioner Sarnoff mentioned, about half the city is designated brownfield.
That's out of your control. I
Major parts
understand
of downtown, you know, does this area have to be an additionally designated area? No, it does not. On the third issue, we have reached out already to the property appraiser regarding why the information is displayed. Is there a legal requirement for him to display that information? There is not.
My question only had to do with the removal of the dirt.
With regard to the removal of the dirt, as Mr. Russell pointed out, we have other properties that we're dealing with the city. There are other parks that have been remediated in the past, and I think, you know, the city, we have limited resources. We have to take that into account. We have to factor how all these parks are going to be addressed. There comes an issue of what's appropriate at one park should be appropriate at all parks. So we have to weigh our financial resources with providing, you know, what meets a health and clean standard and meets a life safety requirement.
To that point, I have a question specifically about Blanche Park. It is my understanding that the contaminated soil that was dug up around the roots of the trees or whatever, for whatever reason, if anything that was taken up was actually removed, that nothing was used for grading to spread around, that it wasn't all removed, but what was dug out was removed. Is that correct? Was anything removed?
In the case of Blanche Park, we had limited topography with which to accommodate any soil. So there was some removal. We have other parks. For example, this park I think is 5.5 acres. We have Douglas Park, that's 10 acres. We have Curtis Park, that's going to be 20 acres. Those parks, the remediation plan will be to keep everything on site and
But in line with what you just said, if it's good for one park, it's good for the other parks. And Blanche Park did actually have some contamination soil removed from the property.
But we have to
Blanche
work with
Park.
our geographic and geometric district.
Blanche Park, so you know, has only 1 foot of engineering control, but it does have artificial turf over it. But the Blanche Park goes down, so if you go down 1 foot, you'll hit your contaminant. You can go down another 13 feet and you'll still be contaminated. So, you know, it's bear in mind, what you do here affects, or should affect, every other park. So what you're doing in this 5-acre park, you're talking about affecting for about 30 other acres of the city. So you're not just talking about 1 or 2 million, you're talking about what potentially could be 50, 60 million.
And I have a little follow-up question, again directed to
How does 1 and
both
2
of you
become
representatives
50
who
or
have been so
60?
kind to come out today.
2 times 5 is 10.
If the community were to enact a fundraising drive to help fund that, would the city consider a stay on the respreading of that and the grading of this park?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Like,
shouldn't
would
have
the city,
to.
Would the city be willing to enter into a dialogue with the community?
I know
About
that
that.
I would be willing to bring that.
I think that's something we discussed with the county, the time frame. I mean, it's just that much longer that this part of the park would remain closed.
I set up my first telescope in this park on Christmas Day in 1990. I love this park. I've been coming here since I was this big. I don't want to see AstroTurf spread over any part of this park.
There's no
I
plan
don't.
for AstroTurf.
I understand that. I understand that. But I don't want to see contaminated soil go back into this park. I think if there's a problem that was discovered, it needs to be removed.
But removal of all of it is a gargantuan task.
Absolutely, I understand that. I totally understand.
Several million
Was it,
dollars.
what,
We
is there,
pay
can
gargantuan
we
taxes
quantify
for
really
this.
quick the 1 to 2 million that keeps getting thrown around?
I mean, come on.
Has there been a budget for removal of that? Does anyone know what it would cost to remove that that's sitting
When it's
there right
already
now?
dug up.
I think it should probably be around $300,000.
To remove.
It's not much.
Just to remove.
Just to remove
what's dug up. How much?
Even if it were 300,000,
But
that's so worth
$300,000
it.
is nothing.
Yeah.
We pay huge
That's not
taxes.
2 million.
Yeah.
What are our tax dollars? We pay a lot of taxes on our properties here. Where's it going?
Less than the cost of litigation. Has the city considered the cost of litigation? Where's all that money? You haven't had to be removing. You haven't had to remove all the stuff that's Exactly. We haven't had a cleanup since 2005.
Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Has the city considered the cost of litigating? I mean, I assume the cost of litigating is going to outweigh any cost
Sir,
of removing
sir.
You know, I'm a litigator, so I almost want to put my foot in that, but I'm not going to. I don't think that's a direction you're really going to want to go for a host of reasons.
Look, I'm new to the neighborhood, but I'm hearing about talking with lawyers, so.
I hear you, but everything the city is doing, it's doing under Environmental Protection Agency standards. So then you would have to declare the EPA standards to be incorrect. That, I just suggest to you, is a gargantuan task.
I'm willing to take that on, because I think the plan for this park could have been a little better.
The original
agree.
contamination, is there no recourse with whoever that was?
But who was it?
It was the city of Miami?
It was the city of Miami.
Am I wrong there?
You really don't know that. Because as I said to somebody earlier, if you drew a line from where the let's assume for a moment it's the incinerators. And you don't really 100% know that. You drew a line to where the Coral Gables incinerator is, and you drew the one to where the city of Miami's was. The Coral Gables incinerator is closer. But that's, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Coral Gables. In 1940s, everybody had a different, you know, I don't know. Where's everybody carrying their cell phones right now? In 30 years from now, people might go, you know those people were crazy enough to hold a cell phone in their pockets? Things change and people evolve and technology evolves. To say it was the city is not a fair statement. Just, by the way, we had an older gentleman tell us everybody used to dump their garbage up there. Does that make it right? You know, so trying to find the blame as to who put it there, it's a task you'll never be able to make that call.
I can't blame the city for what they did 50 years ago, but I can definitely blame them for what they choose to do with the toxic soil now.
What is the cost of remediating the entire park? Removing the trees, digging up all the soil, and making this a clean area.
I don't know, but I will tell you this. I'm not in favor of digging up the trees.
But Commissioner, it's been 1 year. 1 year since the park closed. So what's the rush to move on to the next phase of the project? Why can't we have a stay and think things over and talk about what's the optimal plan? As you know, that's all we're asking for.
We're not in a hurry. We want it done right.
I understand, and that's what we're willing to give you is a conversation on Thursday, and that's part of the meeting. You're gonna have the appropriate agencies there. You're gonna have the appropriate experts. You're gonna have doctors there. You're gonna get real information as opposed to I read this on the internet.
And may I have just a follow-up question? How does the city prioritize their projects? Because we all understand their limited resources, right? But then we see work on Brickell Avenue to redo it, and gyms coming up, and things that nobody necessarily...
Commodore Street, taking perfectly clean, safe trees, removing all of the trees, putting in new brick sidewalks.
Well,
how much did the city spend there?
Projects that nobody's really asking for, that are not as critical as this.
Money.
Well, I don't know.
You know, how do you prioritize those resources?
Basically, well, that project you're talking about right there, it was a number of times we got sued for people tripping and falling.
Oh, I heard that from the salon there on the corner, which, but then I heard, I mean, I don't know, what's the purpose of planting brand new trees, tiny little trees, taking out the old ones that have been there for 50 years?
The survey was done.
Actually, the new trees have a different kind of root system than the old trees and should
Yes,
not
I
build
saw
up
the system. I saw the system underneath the
sidewalk
sidewalk and everything.
as the old trees did. But I don't agree with the project, but I do understand the city's reasoning in deciding to do that.
Let's try to stay with this one.
Who has the authority to do and I have a really quick question. What is the scheduled date for the start of regrading this park and putting that soil back into it? What is that date? Because I'm sure there is one with the city.
At this point, it's just an ongoing activity. I don't know that there's a specific.
Okay.
I would say at the pace they're going, I'd say this coming week.
That's okay. So that's again my question: is this process going to start before our meeting on Thursday?
The meeting is not stopping this, unfortunately.
Okay, so
I think it's a meeting to make us feel good and be heard, but it's not stopping us.
Who has the authority to place a stay?
Right.
From tomorrow, they're coming and they're digging up again. I mean, this is not. I mean,
Ms.
we're here.
Bravo does.
What are we doing here?
we want to be reassured that someone has the authority to put a stay. We're not asking for a huge deal. A stay, 1 week, 2 weeks, not a big deal.
Are we wrong with this, that the
A few
bucket for
days.
that stops with the city management
I mean,
department?
because really,
Yeah.
we're really wasting our time here.
What's the phone number we
Well, we're giving a chance for dialogue, and if that doesn't work, we have to go to the. It's going to be a nightmare if we have to litigate for everybody involved. In the cities, it's not good.
I work for a plaintiff firm. I will be talking to them tomorrow, and they love to take on the federal government. So.
I have a question. Is the guy who writes for Miami New Times here, David? Is the guy who
New
wrote?
Times guy?
Yeah,
Is
is he
anyone
here?
from the New Times?
Because in the last story he wrote, he said that there was a window where the city was going to sign some contracts with somebody. And the only time you had for litigation was between now and whenever those contracts were signed. And I don't understand that, but I was hoping he was going to be here because he wrote the story. Or maybe you all can explain that. Is there a window? Is there a window that closes once the contracts are signed, whatever contracts you sign? You don't know?
Not aware of any windows.
Okay.
She has the power to stop this remediation.
Is there a way, I think to follow up to the other questions, is there a way that people can know, whether it's a phone number or an email, to send thoughts to the county manager, or if we want to try to stop things?
Yes, if you're on this mailing list, I will generate a list of all the relevant contacts within the county and the city.
Okay, so, because, if there, 200 people tomorrow morning call or write emails, maybe something.
Well, you're going to get the same, you're going to get a lot of the same of what you're going to hear on Thursday. It's the medical reasoning that this isn't so bad, the reasoning that this is within the rules, that the county made them do it. Look on the back of these signs. There's some things that I've put together from my research that will dispel some of the things that I know we're going to hear. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but it's what I've learned. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, does it make any difference that part of it is Coral Gables, another part is Coconut Grove?
This park is all in the city of Miami.
The Coral Gables delineation is along Battersea.
And Lejeune.
Yeah.
I'd just like to know, I know you're not in favor of this, but what is the total cost to remediate the park?
This park?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be
Total
more. It's existing.
remediation,
I think it's 1.5 to 2 million.
So let me understand, including removing the trees and digging up all that soil?
No. The cost of the currently planned project is $1.5 million.
What, it has $1 million sign on it.
It says 980 or something on the sign.
980,000.
Have we done a cost study on total remediation of the park?
Total remediation would be another $3 million.
Alright, so we're talking $4.5 million.
No,
as opposed
total
to-
$4 million.
is what Spanioli said.
So $4 million to potentially remove, I don't know what kind of percentage drop we're looking at in terms of property values, but I've heard from other neighbors that property values are already affected. There's already damage done to property values from people reselling their properties right here on Woodbridge, where I live, and around people who've done open houses who basically are pulling their house off the market because they can't sell it. Nobody will come here, okay? What is the cost of that compared to a $4 million bill spread out over 30 years?
Yeah.
What, I mean, this has to be discussed. This is the real fundamental problem. It's an economic problem, and I don't understand the decision making here.
And the city
I'm
could
sorry.
issue a bond for this. They could do all kinds of things. So, limited resources, yes, but there are things that the city can do. So one thing, I think all of us here would like to ask you this direct question. If you're 100% sure that there's no more spreading of contamination, go ahead. Keep on doing the project. But if there's 1% risk, what we're asking for is a stay, time to review in depth the plans on our arguments. That's what we're asking, and I think it's within your power to affect that. So
Stop
why
it for a
wouldn't you?
week. Give it a week so we can talk.
We came here today to listen, so.
Please, stop the remediation
This should have
for
been
1
done
week so
before
the
any work
relevant
started.
parties can meet and
That's the
possibly
problem.
come to a compromise.
All right, see you all on Thursday.
Awesome. See you Thursday night.
Thank you all for coming. Please sign up if you'd like more information.